Mercury is one of the most toxic elements and a persistent traveler through our environment. So who's the travel agent for this elemental poison? Coal-fired power plants? Most definitely. Mining operations? Of course. Your neighborhood dental office? Surprisingly, yes.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Is mercury toxic?
Elemental mercury is toxic.
Silver amalgam fillings, does it contain mercury?
It does.
Almost up to 50%?
Yes?
Mercury is a toxic substance. Why is it that the ADIA will not tell the public that mercury amalgam is harmful?
Frankly, the American Dental Association welcomes new looks at all of the dental restorative materials.
The American people are being overtly lied to by the American Dental Association and the dental branch of the Food and Drug Administration. My name is Boyd Haley. I was born in 1940 in a small farm community near New Point, Indiana. Laziness was the worst attribute a person could have. You know, you had to work hard and you had to be honest. Liars weren't tolerated. Shortly after I was born, my dad went into the military and went to the South Pacific. When he came home, he was a different person. He had some issues that he brought back to the war. I left home to live with my grandparents when I was about the 4th grade. My dad and I could not see eye to eye, and I think a lot of that was I was a very energetic, inquisitive kid. From that point on, I lived in about 6 or 7 different places with different farm families. People today would say they'd see me digging post holes in the rain and that I was being abused. I never ever felt abused because I had a dog and I could go hunt. I could roam those fields and that woods, and I love that. And I'm more comfortable in the woods than any place in the world. You know, a joy in my life is the chemistry aspect of science and making things, putting molecules together to solve problems. And that's what led to my current job right now, making a compound that is safe, goes inside cells and binds mercury and renders it non-toxic. I was a professor of chemistry and biochemistry at the University of Kentucky. I've been doing mercury research since about 1985. I came to the University of Kentucky, and my research here led me into Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Marksberry had found elevated mercury in the brains of Alzheimer's patients, so I did a set of studies showing what heavy metals would do this, and mercury was one of them I put in. And at that time, I had no concern about amalgam fillings, anything regarding mercury toxicity. And the results were dramatic. Phenomenal data that came out was that mercury, and only mercury, would cause the same biochemical abnormalities as you saw in Alzheimer's disease using our technology for evaluating the activity of certain enzymes. And then all of a sudden the problem changed. It was no longer a scientific problem that I ran into. That was easy. I mean, I could do that. The problem was political. When I tried to get funded to look at mercury as a neurotoxin and its possibilities of contributing to Alzheimer's disease, they shut me down. My grants were just totally rejected. And it said something to the effect, Dr. Haley has to realize we don't need to see any more of these kinds of studies. Since that time, I've never gotten another NIH grant, and that was soul-destroying. I had been funded for 20-some years of doing research. Then all of a sudden, I couldn't get a grant. I had no money to run my laboratories, and I felt like I just walked off a cliff and was, hanging on to that last branch. And I was devastated. And Sandy helped me through that. When I first wrote in those grants, I remember talking to Sandy about how important I thought they were. Sandy's a good sounding board, gives good advice. And she helped me accept the fact that my ideas were not going to be accepted by the current medical establishment. The first time I saw Sandy was she was walking down the farm lanes, and she would walk up and get on the same school bus I was riding on. She was the first girl I ever dated. When I was about a junior in high school, I asked her on a hayride. When I came back from out of the Army, she picked me up. We were sitting in her car, but I asked her to marry me, and I told her what my goal was to go get a PhD in chemistry, and it was going to be tough for about 4 or 5 years because you're not going to make a lot of money.
Well, it's been very important to both Boyd and I to stay balanced, and we both love nature, we both love animals. So this is a perfect place for us. It's our refuge against the stresses of life. So we love it here. For over 20 years, Boyd has committed himself to educating people about the dangers of mercury exposure. He has traveled all over the world. Sometimes he's gone once a month, so it's a considerable amount of time. He has sacrificed a lot in the way of time, energy, and money. He doesn't do this for monetary reasons. He does it because he's so passionate and committed to the cause. It takes a very courageous person to be truthful and speak honestly as he has. I admire him for that.
But since 1991, I've been giving talks all over the world. I was averaging over 30 trips a year. And, you know, testified in front of Congress. I've gone to Europe many, many times. And that's not an easy trip for an older person like me. It takes a lot of starch out of you. The organization that actually introduced me to the concept that dental amalgams were releasing toxic amounts of mercury is the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. They thought it was causing a lot of medical damage, and they were right. I mean, I agree with them now. I didn't at the time. I thought that the FDA nor the ADA would allow anyone to put something in the mouths of citizens that release so much mercury vapor and not have tested it. I've given up a huge number of my weekends with my family to go to meetings because this is a message that has to get out, that the amalgams are toxic to people and are causing a lot of problems.
Amalgams or silver fillings have been used for over 150 years. Some critics have claimed that amalgams are unsafe. This is not true.
You can't install a mercury-releasing product into someone's mouth 2 inches from their brain and expect not to see some repercussions. Amalgam fillings contain roughly 50% elemental mercury, which releases mercury vapor that is higher than what the ADA estimates. The science tells us that 80% of the mercury vapor we breathe accumulates in our bodies very quickly, with a good portion ending up in our brains.
I'm Dr. Matthew Young. I'm a general dentist here in Hendersonville, North Carolina. I've been here at this location for 29 years. I was a traditional dentist for about 10 or 12 years and then found out about the dangers of mercury and other dental materials, so we became mercury-free, not putting in any mercury amalgam fillings. And then when I discovered the International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology, then I became mercury safe. What that means is we use special protective engineering controls for OSHA to reduce the exposure of our employees and our patients to the mercury vapor when the old mercury fillings are removed.
We've been out here at Dr. Young's office this week installing a multi-point mercury monitoring system that continuously and sequentially measures from 8 different sample points throughout his dental office. Almost all of our other clients that deal with mercury are required by OSHA and EPA to measure their facility throughout the day to make sure that their employees are below the ceiling limit, which is 100 micrograms per cubic meter. Dr. Young has taken a major step here by being the first dentist that I'm aware of to install a multi-point mercury monitoring system into his office. He's doing everything that he can to keep his employees and himself, as well as his patients, safe during normal procedures that have to do with dental mercury amalgam fillings.
And this is what the OSHA regulation requires, is that the dentist is aware of how much mercury is in his office, that the employees are educated about it. We have a heavy metal chapter in our OSHA handbook that the employees have to read and understand. And they have to wear special protective gear so it keeps off their skin and they're not allowed to breathe it. And our machine keeps track of how clean the air is here in order to stay below these dangerous levels. And I think it's incumbent ethically upon the dentist to be aware of those risks and to also monitor and educate their employees every day.
As dentists drill out a filling, their dental drill runs at about 400,000 RPM, and it sends a shower of micron size and submicron size particles everywhere. It's tens of thousands of parts per million. There was literature actually that measured the amount of particulate matter in the airspace or the breathing zone of a dentist during removals, and a researcher had studied this using mannequins into which they had put in fake teeth with fillings in them and then drilled them out and taken all the measurements while they were doing it. And the dose of particulate matter experienced by dentists, if they don't take precautions, is huge. It's way larger than the vapor exposure they get during the same process. Particulate exposure for a single filling delivers micrograms of mercury, which in mercury terms is a lot. And even if they wear the typical surgical mask, they're designed to stop particles of around 3 microns in size or larger, because that's the size of typical bacteria. Well, the particles of amalgam pass right through that mask because they're well less than 3 microns. They average around 1.5 microns in size and go down to the submicron level. The amalgam load would probably give them 100 times more exposure to mercury than just inhaling the vapor that is present at the same time. The particle load carries 50% of the mass of any particular particle is mercury, and that's delivered straight to the lungs, and it's absorbed within 3 days, and the mass is quite large. And it stays there, as opposed to the mercury vapor drops off fairly quickly. The amalgam particles that have been inhaled, they don't dissipate anywhere but directly into the body. So the dose delivered is very, very significant.
I just flew in from Santiago, Chile, where I gave a presentation to a group of legislators and researchers down there. And tomorrow I give a talk to the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology on how mercury causes some of the biochemical abnormalities that we see in some of the neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's disease.
Dr. Haley is a research scientist and international lecturer. He is a former chairman of the Department of Chemistry at the University of Kentucky. He has numerous research studies published in peer-reviewed medical scientific journals. Please welcome to the podium Dr. Boyd Haley.
Mercury, and only mercury, causes the breakdown and depolymerization of tubulin off of the neurofibril, producing neurofibrillary tangles, which is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Not only that, but published studies repeatedly show that the widespread exposure of mercury and its effects on the brain explains every single aspect of Alzheimer's disease. It is the missing piece of the puzzle that's been literally right under the noses of researchers for all these years. Dental amalgams release many micrograms of mercury per day into our bodies. So you not only have, a toxin that can do the effect, you have it placed within inches of your brain. And how do you get that across to people? And I think I do a decent job, but sometimes I'm not so sure it's adequate. And a lot of people, they want my slides. Anybody ask for them, have my slides. You can give my talk, I don't care. I mean, this is not information that's secretive or anything. It's something that should be out there for everybody to use.
Welcome to Word of Mouth, where dentists talk about how oral health is related to overall health, which is also known as the oral systemic connection. I'm Dr. Griffin Cole. I'm a past president and a master in the academy. And I'm here with Dr. Boyd Haley, one of the preeminent researchers on mercury chelation and detox. Can you just share a little bit about how toxic mercury really is in the human body?
The real damaging aspect of mercury toxicity that most people don't understand. We have a compound in our body called glutathione. It's the highest concentration small molecule inside of cells, and it's there to protect us from toxins and oxidation reactions that, oxidative stress, etc. In all of these neurological diseases we're talking about, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, autism, arthritis, you go down to all these autoimmune diseases, the one thing that happens with all of them is that they have very, very low intracellular glutathione levels. Their glutathione levels somehow have been decreased, and that's how we say they're under oxidative stress. And I would submit to anybody that nothing causes oxidative stress faster and better and more completely than mercury exposure. What happens? Mercury goes in and sets on a mitochondrial electron transport chain. And it turns that mitochondria electron transport chain into a hydroxy-free radical manufacturing plant. Where it used to make ATP now, that electron transport system is now making hydroxy radicals because that end is blocked and inhibited by mercury, and then you get a huge flood of hydroxy radicals, which is the toxic compound that's produced in the body during inflammation or oxidative stress that causes us to age, get sick, causes our cells to fall apart. So mercury induces oxidative stress, and so you get this plethora of hydroxy radicals that causes the cells essentially to die. Once mercury gets into your brain and gets oxidated, it doesn't come out very fast. I mean, the estimations, some of them I've read have been as high as that mercury has a half-life in the brain of over 27 years. There's absolutely no doubt that mercury, when it gets into the central nervous system, does not come out nearly as fast as it comes out of your muscles, your liver, your heart, and other tissues. It has a very long-lived in the central nervous system. And that's the reason breathing vapors is so, like they come from amalgam fillings, is so toxic. Mercury vapor is uncharged. It can go straight through the roof of your mouth. It goes into your nasal mucosa. It can go straight up your nose, through your olfactory bulb, etc. And it's only when it gets into the brain and it's oxidized from Hg0 with no charge to Hg2 plus that it binds to proteins and has its toxic effect and latches onto a protein and, and has a very long residency time on that protein, inhibiting its function. And it won't kill you immediately, but it does. It's a retention toxicity. It builds up in your body, and as you get older, you pay the price later as the mercury levels reach a certain point in your body where certain organs don't function properly. And this is the problem, and this is the reason it's so difficult to point out the toxicity, but it's real. We can show it in animals. We have shown it in animals. The same thing with mercury, except the rate of mitochondrial damage is much slower than radiation. And when you damage a person's mitochondria and you get that level building up, then all of a sudden they can't maintain a healthy brain, they can't maintain a healthy heart. And that's the real problem, is that it's a slow, insidious toxicity that's very difficult to put a finger on.
Emeramed, NBMI, is what you've been working on for many years. It was OSR back in the day. So describe what Emeramed does and why it's so unique.
So this compound, the compound we made, is just really a super glutathione molecule. It's super in its ability to react with hydroxy radicals, scavenging them, preventing them from consuming the glutathione in your body, which is used to remove other toxic organic molecules. And it also binds to mercury that's in the body, rendering it non-toxic. And for example, we've done studies where we have injected rats with increasing lethal levels of mercury, 1 lethal level 2 to 14. And then after half an hour after that mercury has dispersed throughout the rat's body, and in high levels, they're going into convulsions. If we inject this under the skin, the flab of the skin, subcutaneously, we've recovered almost all those rats from mercury toxicity. The next day they will be well, and they will totally recover. If it's a low level, just like 1 or 2 lethal doses, they don't even get sick. You don't see any loss of weight, etc. And when we sacrifice these animals, we've done a study, it's coming out, and measure the mercury in their organs, it's there. But there's no outward sign of toxicity. For example, in the 10 rats that were given mercury alone, 6/10 of a lethal dose, 2 of them died. All of them had blood in their urine and feces. All of them lost weight. All of them became ataxic, couldn't walk straight. And at the end of 5 days, we sacrificed them. And compared them to a group that got the same amount of mercury, and then 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, we treated them with the compound by injection under the flab of their skin. They didn't get sick at all. They didn't lose weight. None of them died. None of them had blood in their urine and feces. When they did that and looked at the kidneys, they weren't inflamed at all. So it totally protected. Then you take all of those tissues and you analyze the level of mercury. The compound did not rapidly decrease the amount of mercury that was in the body. That mercury was still there, but it was non-toxic, and that was their conclusion, similar to what we had seen earlier with the lethal dose studies. The mercury is still in your body, but it's tied up by this compound and rendered non-toxic. Now, that mercury that's tied up was going out in the feces of these rats. But it wasn't going out any faster with or without the compound. They seemed to be at the same level, because your body can only transport so much at a time, but it would slowly get the mercury out. We know it doesn't build up in the body because we've measured it. And we're doing further studies to confirm that even more absolutely. But the bottom line is we have something that's phenomenal. No one else can talk about anything that would prevent death from multiple lethal doses injected in under your skin of mercury chloride. And this will do that. So we have something that's going to be, we think, effective for treating anyone that has a high level of mercury, cadmium, lead, or arsenic exposure. Well, I can't remember when I didn't enjoy fishing. My granddad was a person who liked to fish quite a bit and took me quite often. It's always been a major relaxation for me. I went to graduate school. We ate a lot off of what I either caught fishing, my wife and I, or what I shot bird hunting with my dogs. Catching fish was a supplement to our diet, and since we didn't have a lot of money, eating fish was probably better than what we could buy in the grocery store. It's a big difference. And it's kind of sad that today the kids are told, everyone's told, don't eat too many of the fish, they're too toxic with mercury. There are fish advisories about almost all the water in the United States. I think it's sad. Why go fish if you can't eat the fish you're catching? If you're catching something that's toxic, it just takes the romance and the livelihoodness out of it. So, and I think we should do everything we can to get our water and air clean again. That means we have to stop all kinds of mercury. We can't blame just one group. And things that you can do something about, like dental amalgams, that should be done.
The United Nations Environment Program reports that 10% of global mercury usage is for amalgam tooth fillings. This results in up to 340 tons of dental mercury journeying into the environment each year. In the United States, dentists are currently the largest users of elemental mercury. This accounts for roughly 32 tons of mercury used yearly to place amalgam restorations, otherwise known as silver fillings. Although the number of amalgams placed has decreased over the last few decades, dentists still use amalgam without precautions, so the threat of mercury exposure continues. Dental mercury travels many pathways on its journey back into the environment. It starts when a dentist receives precapsulated dental amalgam. In each capsule, up to 900 milligrams of elemental mercury is separated from the other alloys. To make the final product, the capsule is vigorously shaken in a triturator to thoroughly mix all the elements. Occupational safety concerns arise because this heats the mercury, creating thousands of micrograms of mercury vapor, which are released upon opening the capsule. The used amalgam capsule still contains a small amount of mercury, so the ADA recommends the capsules be stored in an airtight container and collected by a hazardous waste company. Unfortunately, the majority of dentists toss the capsules into the trash. This mercury-contaminated trash will eventually travel to a landfill, where the mercury will continue its trek down into the soil.
For over 75 years, consumers and dental professionals have looked for the American Dental Association's seal of acceptance on products. The ADA seal stands for quality and effectiveness. Manufacturers who apply for the seal must meet certain criteria. They must provide objective data supporting the product's safety.
We've never done any safety studies on this product. I'm the former consumer representative on the dental products panel at the FDA. If amalgam is taken to a Class 3 by the FDA, Class 3 would require manufacturers to prove safety, which they never had to do. They're not going to spend the millions of dollars to try to prove that mercury is safe when everyone knows it isn't.
All product claims made on packaging and labeling are approved by the ADA, so you can trust them.
I've been pushed by the ADA, American Dental Association, as somebody that's on the lunatic fringe. And what's lunatic about the fact that somebody's putting a most toxic metal known to man in your mouth? And I'm saying, hey, we really need to look at this. This may be the cause of Alzheimer's disease. We have to do something. We have to come up with something that's very dramatic. I am going to visualize the mercury vapor rolling off of these amalgams when you put a drill on them or when you abrade them in any way. This will leave no doubt in people's mind that there's a lot of mercury coming out of dental amalgams when you put them in, when you take them out. I'm very optimistic this may change the entire attitude of the American Dental Association.
Dr. Boyd Haley coming from University of Kentucky up at Lexington, and he's going to help us to put the box together where we're going to visualize the mercury vapor. Yeah, the first smoking tooth video shows a 25-year-old amalgam from an extracted tooth, and they put it in front of the mercury lamp, and you can see exactly how much mercury is vaporizing off the filling. When you see this for the first time, it's quite a shock to see the amount of mercury and the volume that your patients are either breathing or swallowing. And from then on, I knew that I wasn't going to place any more amalgams, and when I removed them, I was going to do it safely. I just think the best thing to do is to keep in mind that our ethical creed is to do no harm. I think the biggest confliction from anybody who first joins the ILMT is you're going to have to talk to the same patients that you just put the mercury fillings in maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, and tell them that you've learned this new information about it. I think you have to come to terms in your own ethics and your own heart as to how you're going to communicate that and how you're going to present that to patients without feeling like you're contradicting your previous work. The most beautiful part about the whole transition is that your patient loyalty really blooms tremendously, because it seems like the patients know more about this than the traditional dentists do.
We're going to go to Walmart and pick up some material to make a box so we can video mercury leaving a dental amalgam like you would do in a general chemistry experiment. The most uneducated person is going to look at that and say, that is mercury vapor coming off of an amalgam that's been in my mouth for 20 years. This is a really inexpensive experiment. The ADA and the FDA could do this with their lunch money. And yet they refuse to do it, and they'll even make claims that what we're doing can't be repeated. And it's something that's done in so many general chemistry laboratories that you can't deny that what it's measuring. Dr. Matt Young and I are going to make this box and demonstrate this. Hello, Maddie.
Oh, hey, Boyd.
Good to see you.
Glad to have you. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Mercury vapor, you can't see it in the daylight, and if you breathe it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it. So what we're hoping is that when we make visuals showing this mercury vapor rolling off of these amalgams when you put a drill on them, that the dentist will all of a sudden, oh my God, these guys aren't lying. There's a lot of mercury coming off. We can visually show it. And this is an approach that's been developed by chemists to activate a mercury lamp. A mercury lamp is a lamp that contains mercury vapor that you run a current through, and that mercury emits a light of a special wavelength that water and air will not absorb. However, if you place in front of that lamp an amalgam and a tooth, and you activate that tooth by brushing it, then millions and millions of atoms of mercury come off of that tooth. When the atom of mercury gets in between the screen and the lamp, it absorbs that photon and blocks that light, and it looks like there is a shadow made on the screen where the mercury is absorbing the light. So what you're seeing is really an absorbance of the photon by the mercury atom that reflects as a shadow on the screen.
In addition, there's a lot of skeptics out there that think this is water vapor coming off the teeth and not actually mercury. We want to prove once and for all that it's actually mercury vapor that's coming off. We also have a hole in the top of the box with which we will insert our probe. And this is going to go to the mercury 3000 mass spectrophotometer. And this is going to go into the top of the box like this so that a sample of the air during these procedures can be measured accurately.
Before we got married, Sandy and I talked about having children. So we decided that we would start our family right at the end of my PhD career. Michelle was born during the last year of my PhD studies. About 5 years later, we had Shannon. Shannon and I, we get on the phone and talk about research all the time. One night when she was writing her PhD thesis, was on the internet, and she saw on a site where they'd said some pretty horrible things about me. She was upset, because she knew I wasn't that way. I calmed her down, talked to her, and told her who they were, and that if you're going to make a difference in the world, you got to develop somewhat of a thick skin, because there are going to be people that say things about you. But it still hurt. I mean, nobody likes their children reading that they're a charlatan and that they're doing things that are unethical, etc. It's a form of character assassination. I remember when I hung up from her, I felt really bad that I couldn't tell her, well, your dad's really right on this. I can say that, but everybody else in the world is hearing 10 times, 20 times more from the ADA, and people like me are on the lunatic fringe. I can't go chase around the internet, respond to everything they're saying. An old saying my granddad used to have, you can get into an urinating contest with a skunk, and you might win, but you're going to smell bad. And so I came into the front room, got a glass of red wine, and sat there and really thought about it, because it was very, very disturbing. I care about what my daughters think about me, what my wife thinks about me, and what my grandchildren think about me. And I want them to think that, Granddad was a hell of a man. He worked hard and he did the right thing all the time. And I finally realized I can't out-PR them. There's a lot more of them than there are me. And I had to do something to stop this. The only way I could win this fight was to do something to remove mercury toxicity from people and show that this would make them healthier. And that's the night that I decided that I was going to make a safe and effective chelator to remove mercury from the body. European Medicine Agency and then the FDA, neither one of them have an approved treatment for mercury toxicity. The compounds that people use today, DMPS, DMSA, EDTA, they have failings. Because the chelators are all toxic in a way. People are made more sick by taking chelation when they're metal toxic if you don't do it right. The problem is all the chelators do not penetrate the cells, and goodness, that's where the mercury goes to cause its toxic effect. you're taking a drug that doesn't get inside cells to treat that. That's silly. That's not logical. And the one we made, the nice thing about it, it penetrates the blood-brain barrier, gets into the brain, penetrates the cell membranes, it penetrates into the mitochondria, and it binds mercury in the body and renders it non-toxic. Well, that's a logical approach to solving a biomedical problem. Go where the toxin is setting. We now have our compound designated as an orphan drug to treat mercury toxicity in both the USA and in Europe. An orphan drug is one that isn't worth the pharmaceutical companies working on because there's not enough value there. And right now, the obstacle I have is getting it approved through the regulatory sources as a drug that can be given to people. I've been talking about mercury years before I ever thought about making a chelator.
We just finished constructing our visualization box, which is made out of everyday materials that you can get in any hardware store. Typically in most dental schools, it's been taught that the mercury is trapped within the matrix of the amalgam. And so therefore we're trying to visualize here and prove the fact that there's a significant amount that comes off during the mixing, during the packing, and then we have some teeth with the amalgam that's been set for a while, and we're going to be removing that with a high-speed dental drill in order to visualize how much vapor comes off during that procedure as well.
The American Dental Association has made the argument that mercury is fixed in amalgam fillings and it doesn't come out easily. And what this research that we're doing here visually shows is that when you drill on an amalgam filling, that it dramatically exposes the patient and the dentist and the dental technician to huge amounts of mercury vapor that enters the body. It's even worse than what they imagined.
2,483 micrograms per cubic meter, and I've never seen levels of mercury this high. That's pretty much unheard of in any type of work environment.
Because it definitely shows, with just absolute fact, hard science, that amalgams, when they are heated with the drill, by drilling on them, release copious amounts of mercury vapor into the air.
Clearly, if you're not measuring it, you're not monitoring it, and you're not educating these employees, then the OSHA regulations are not being upheld.
And so I just asked the ADA, don't you care about your own people? I mean, these are people who are members of the ADA, and you're exposing them to high levels of mercury vapor by still supporting the use of dental amalgams.
The ADA's message is simple, and it's been this for many, many years, and that is that amalgam is a safe and effective dental material.
It's disconcerting that despite all the regulations regarding mercury in the workplace, mainstream dentistry still promotes these fillings as perfectly safe.
The science hasn't changed. The science has been this way for decades. Unfortunately, there's some groups who don't accept the science, who like to rely on fear and other factors.
The ADA is a group that just dismisses and denies without doing any experiments. They could be doing the same experiments we're doing, showing that mercury doesn't come off. I want to see them do that.
What patient safety and science shows us, what science shows us now, is that patient safety is absolutely protected with dental amalgam material.
When a dentist goes in to grind out an amalgam filling, he is creating tremendous quantities of mercury particulate.
So for that period of time they're working, they're 100-fold over the recommended levels for air in a workplace.
In dental school, they taught us nothing about protecting the dentist, the staff, or the patients from the dangers of mercury vapor.
Dental schools ought to be fearful of major lawsuits because this is not a secret anymore. You can see it coming out. I mean, the exposure to mercury to those people is just tremendous.
We're turning now to the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard. It is a final regulation and there is no escape for it for any of us.
Everyone working around hazardous chemicals and other toxic substances has a right to know of possible dangers and how to protect themselves.
We've gone back and we looked at the evidence, and what I can tell you is we intend to come out with an announcement by the end of this year.
We sued FDA to compel them to respond to our petitions after waiting very patiently for 5-6 years. And they did so. In January of 2015, they came out with a document that completely affirmed what FDA had found in 2009, which was that mercury fillings are completely safe. We, my team, IAOMT, we were all deeply disappointed. And then we get this whistleblower document. It was a document that provided prohibitions on placing mercury fillings in tens of millions of people. What happened here? What happened? HHS came back and provided a political solution to a thorny scientific problem. HHS put the veto on this statement of policy that would have been published by FDA, but for HHS's political decision, not scientific, political decision, to not change the way the game was played. But don't be deceived, there are hundreds of peer-reviewed, published scientific studies by top authors that associate the mercury in fillings with systemic disease.
On September 24, 2020, the FDA issued recommendations for dental amalgam that warned, quote, harmful health effects of mercury vapor released from the device, end quote, could impact high-risk populations. In particular, the following groups are now advised by the FDA to avoid getting dental amalgam whenever possible and appropriate: pregnant women and their developing fetuses, women who are planning to become pregnant, nursing women and their newborns and infants, children, especially those younger than 6 years of age, people with pre-existing neurological diseases such as multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, or Parkinson's disease, people with impaired kidney function, and people with known heightened sensitivity or allergy to mercury or other components of dental amalgam.
Good girl. And so coming out here, just very relaxing. Mandy. She takes off. And it's a real good working relationship. No one's ever put mercury vapor in an animal that didn't make that animal sick. And yet our government says, but you can't prove that it's toxic just because it's there. The science is there, it's very clear. Anyone that has 2 neurons left to rub together can look at the research data and see that mercury should not be placed in the mouth of a child or to anyone. And yet you can't get an honest discussion with our government or with the medical authorities about this problem. We have not had any success taking to them the most solid science, and I mean tons of it. So no, I'm upset about it, and the science is on my side. The United Nations Environmental Program is eliminating mercury because all the scientists in the world are worried about mercury decreasing the health of all humans from any source. The overall treaty that was accepted had amalgams as a product that needs to be phased out. And that's really great news to us because that means that we're at the beginning of the end for amalgam fillings in the world. I think the job now is to educate the American people. If you go to a dentist who says amalgam fillings are safe and should be placed in your mouth, then you should find yourself another dentist.
Despite a wealth of studies showing the harm of mercury as released from the product, the American Dental Association continues to promote the safety of mercury fillings and supports its use for anyone and everyone, without regard for reproductive status, age, or any of the known factors that make a person unusually susceptible to the effects of mercury.